Okay. Hi, Simon.
Hello, how's it going?
How are you doing?
Good.
Good, good. Okay, cool. So hi, everyone who's watching, and thanks for joining our fourth webinar. Today we have Simon Hilbourne with us. He is our Oceanic Manta researcher, but he's been working in the Maldives for about 4 years with the Maldivian Manta Ray Project, starting in Bar Atoll and working with the mantas in Hanifaru Bay, and then moving to research some of the ocean giants in the south of the Maldives. So he's going to tell you a bit more about this today. Before we get started, for anyone who hasn't watched before, I'll just tell you a bit about how the webinar will work. You are automatically muted and your video is switched off for anybody watching. So don't worry about disturbing the webinar, but we would love you to interact. So if you have any questions at any point throughout the webinar, please just put them in the Q&A box, which should be on the toolbar on your screen. We will have Simon's talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to take as many questions as possible after that. So yeah, send over all your questions. We've had some great ones in the past, and we're looking forward to hearing all of your questions today. And I'll pass you over to Simon.
Perfect, thank you. I'll just get my screen set up. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. So yeah, my name's Simon, and I've been working with the Manta Trust for about 4 years now. And I've recently taken over the Oceanic Manta research side of things in the Maldives for our Maldivian Manta Ray project. If some of you have joined some of the previous webinars, you might have heard a little bit about the Maldives and the manta ray population over there. Most of the manta rays in the Maldives that people swim with and go to the Maldives to sort of see mantas are reef manta rays. So very famous sites like Hanifaru Bay, and a large number of cleaning stations and feeding sites throughout the country. But the vast majority of those are associated with reef manta rays. And there are in fact 2 different species of mantas with a potential 3rd species, but I won't get into that in this talk. And they're the reef manta ray and the oceanic manta. So they are distinguishable by certain characteristics. On the dorsal side, the top side of the manta rays, on a reef manta ray, it's kind of the black colorations on the top of the head make kind of a Y shape, whereas the oceanic manta, it's much more of a abrupt, distinct T shape. On the underside of the manta ray, both oceanics and reef manta rays have spot patterns, with the reef mantas tending to have the spots situated between the gill slits and around the wing margins as well, whereas the oceanic mantas, the spots are primarily located around the abdomen, like the belly area. The 2 species of manta rays were only distinguished and sort of separated into 2 unique species back in 2009, so about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago. So it kind of goes to show how little we really know about manta rays and how new all of this information is to science. Oceanic mantas, they grow up to 7 meters in wingspan, so they are larger of the 2 species, but that sort of 7-meter wingspan is a maximum size for the species. It's like as if you were to say humans grow to 2.7 meters or something. Humans do, but the vast majority of us are 1.70 meters, something like that. So the vast majority of oceanic mantas are more like 5.5 meters, something around that range, but still a fair bit bigger than the reef manta rays. They have a global distribution in tropical, subtropical waters, as far north as places like New Jersey and as far south as sort of the North Island of New Zealand. But the majority of them are found in kind of the tropical warm waters around the equator. And the Maldives is placed home to both species, which is pretty cool. Oceanic manta is very similar to their reef manta cousins. They're late to mature. We reckon about 10 to 15 years before they reach sexual maturity. They live quite a long time. Estimates are about 40 years, but nobody's really been studying them long enough to say definitively. And they have very few offspring, 1 pup at a time every couple of years. So it's very, very slow for the population size to increase. All of these characteristics make Mobulas, oceanic mantas, along with the other Mobula species, very vulnerable to overexploitation. So I need to keep that in mind. I mentioned already that each manta ray has a unique spot pattern. So it's these markings on the underside of the manta. Just like a human has a fingerprint, and police can sort of track and follow and know who we are based on our human fingerprints. Marine scientists and researchers can track and follow and identify oceanic mantas using their spot patterns. They're born with these spot patterns and it doesn't change throughout their lifetime, which makes things a bit easier for us. And it's our way of kind of documenting and knowing who's who and where they're traveling. So to date in the Maldives, we've recorded a population of 714 unique individuals. And these are individuals that we have photo ID records for, so we can kind of distinguish them. Population is roughly 50-50 with a little bit more, little bit higher percentage of males in the population. Although with that sort of 7% of unknown gender, that could quite easily be pretty much bang on 50-50. The 7% of unknown gender, that's just because the photos of those individuals are not clear enough to distinguish whether they're male or female. We've only ever recorded 2 pregnancies within the population, so very, very low percentage of pregnancies. And we have 15 black morph or melanistic oceanic mantas in our database. And that just makes up 2% of the population. So a very, very small percentage are these jet black black morph melanistic mantas. Very, very cool. And only 5% of individuals have ever been resighted, which I'll get onto in a second. So this is a picture of a black morph oceanic, kind of like the creme de la creme of manta ray sightings. Huge jet black on the top, nearly completely black on the underside as well on the belly. Really, really impressive animals. If we compare that to some of the other regions around the world, places like Raja Ampat, they have a very similar percentage of melanistic individuals in their population. But somewhere like Revillagigedo Archipelago in the Pacific coast of Mexico has much higher proportion. I think it's around 30% of individuals, 25% of individuals are this melanistic black morph. In terms of resightings, of the 714 individuals we've documented in the Maldives, only 40 of them have been resighted. So that's about 5% of the population have been sighted on more than one day or in more than one occasion. If we get multiple sightings of the same individual at the same site on the same day, it only counts once. Of those 40 resightings, the vast majority of them are of the same individual. Obviously, it's a resighting, but in pretty much the same location and within 1 or 2 days, maybe up to a week, 10 days. So it doesn't really give us too much information. It just kind of shows that that individual hung around in that area for a little bit of time. We do, however, have 4 resightings on records, which are a bit more interesting. First of all, a black morph oceanic manta was seen in Hanifari Bay in 2007. And that same individual returned to Bar Atoll to Reef Beach 9 years later, and it was resighted. So black morphs make up just 2% of the population, and resightings make up just 5% of the sightings. So to resight a black morph oceanic manta in the Maldives is an incredibly rare opportunity. And this resighting was 9 years, almost to the day, which is pretty cool as well. Another resighting was an individual seen in Marmagili in South Ari, resighted a year later in Rasvari on the west coast of North Malay Atoll. And we have 2 further resightings of individuals that were seen in 2018 in Formula, and then resighted again the following year, 2019, back again in Formula. In terms of sightings across the country, the Maldives is made up of about 1,200 different islands across 26 geographical atolls. We've recorded oceanic manta ray sightings from, I believe, 14 of these atolls throughout the country. The top 4 sighting atolls, or 4 of the top 5 sighting atolls, sorry, are Bar Atoll with 14, North Malay with 9, Lamu with 12, and Adu Atoll with 38 sightings. However, the location for the most sightings recorded is Formula Atoll with 655. So way, way more sightings from Formula Atoll than anywhere else in the country. So we'll take a little bit of a closer look at Formula. This is Formula Atoll. It's a single island, so quite different to all the rest of the atolls in the country. Most of the other atolls are kind of a ring of lots of islands with channels, a shallow lagoon inside, stuff like that. Formula is one single island, no inside the lagoon, no protected area, nothing like that. And there's a southern spur reef sticking out the southeast corner. Just got a little video here, which I'll play. So the fact that it's this one island sort of pinnacle basically sticking out in the middle of nowhere, comes up from very, very deep waters all around it. It acts as a magnet for pelagic species. And we get lots of sightings of different species around Formula, which we don't get in other areas of the Maldives. Oceanic mantas to start with. We also get sightings of very, very large whale sharks compared to the rest of the Maldives, other pelagic species, thresher sharks, sometimes mola mola or ocean sunfish passing by as well. So it's really quite a unique atoll, really interesting biodiversity and different species that we don't get in other areas around the country. So, and far, far higher sighting rate of oceanic mantas than anywhere else. There's one island out of 1,200 in the country. So last year in 2019, I was down in Formula for a couple of weeks. And along with the help of the local dive centers on Formula Atoll, Formula Island, and some of the liveaboards passing through, they all helped collect photo IDs of the oceanic mantas that they saw in the dives, which we're very thankful for. We recorded 334 sightings in a 2-month period. So we're having as many as 10 or 12 oceanic mantas on a single dive, which is really pretty cool. And I think we had at least one oceanic manta sighting on every dive for about a 4-week period. So it was a really impressive season. Similar sort of thing happened in 2018, 2015, and 2010. If we look at some of the numbers for sightings, in blue is for Formula and in red is the rest of the Maldives. You can see over the last couple of years, we've had a lot more sightings, particularly around Formula Atoll. But we do have to keep in mind that tourism has increased a lot in this area. More and more guest houses and local dive centers and stuff have opened up. It's become more popular with liveaboard vessels. So there is more and more survey effort going on. This data is not corrected for survey effort. And in terms of monthly sightings, so the bottom graph, that's all of the year's data all lumped together. And you can see that there's a clear peak in kind of March, April time, where we're getting a lot more oceanic manta sightings than in the rest of the year. So something's happening between March and April where a large number of oceanic mantas seem to be turning up around Formula Atoll. So what are they doing here? Well, every time we encounter a manta ray, we make a note of what the primary behavior that manta ray is doing. So we've recorded 0.2% of sightings have been of oceanic manta rays feeding. So very, very few feeding encounters. It's not surprising, the water around Formula is about 30, 40, 50 meter visibility, crystal clear water. There is just no sort of zooplankton in the water for them to be feeding on. In other areas around the world, places like Raja Ampat and some sites in Socorro area, in Revillagigedo, they encounter oceanic mantas getting cleaned by carrion angelfish or other species. In Formula, we don't see very much cleaning activity at all. We do have a little bit of courtship behavior, so sometimes male shadowing female. Sometimes it's a bit more active courtship trains, but only 4.4% of encounters have been courtship. 95% have just been cruising. So in that little video I played just before, you might have seen a lot of the mantas are just swimming around in the blue. Come out of the blue or off the reef, over to the divers, do a couple of laps around and then swim off again. So what are they doing in this area? Another thing that we noticed is they're highly transient. So the mantas that we were seeing on the sort of first day of diving, we'd go out diving the next day, we'd see lots more mantas, take photo IDs, go back and process them and try and ID them. And they would all be new mantas. So they're not the same ones we were seeing yesterday. And that carried on happening throughout the whole season, very little re-sightings. It seemed to be like a continuous train of new mantas coming in, and we were seeing new mantas every day, but the old mantas had gone already. So if it was a site for used for sort of courtship or mating, like a mating ground, you'd expect the males or the females to sort of hang around because this might be their only opportunity to mate and reproduce. So they would stick around for a little bit longer, but that wasn't the case. So they seem to be highly transient, coming from somewhere, heading off somewhere else, just passing through the waters around Formula. Moving on slightly to threats to oceanic manta rays. Unfortunately, there are a number of threats to these animals. They have natural predators, large sharks and stuff like that are known to hunt and take a bite out of mantas. Unsustainable tourism as well has a risk to drive populations away. And we see a number of mantas entangled in fishing line and fishing net as well. But by far the biggest threat to oceanic manta rays around the world is from fisheries, both targeted and bycatch fisheries. The main driver of this is for the manta or Mobula gill plates. Okay, so this is the filament inside the 5 pairs of gill slits that the mantas use to feed. These are used in Southeast Asian traditional medicines, although it's not really traditional. It's a very new phenomena that's sort of only come up in the last couple of years and is being marketed heavily. It's eaten as a tonic or as a soup, and it's supposed to have magical healing abilities. Like the gill plates basically sift out the positive stuff in the water for the manta ray, and it keeps all the good nutrients and things like that. So the idea is the same sort of thing will happen with me. If I eat the gill plates, it will purify my body and it will cleanse and it will keep only the good stuff, and all the negative energy will pass through and it will purify me. No scientific value to it whatsoever, and it's a highly wasteful industry as well because they're only after a very small section of the animal, similar to shark fins. Unfortunately, over in Sri Lanka, they have one of the largest Mobula fisheries in the world. So they catch a large number of oceanic manta rays, as well as other devil ray species, some of the smaller mobulids. In Sri Lanka, I won't go into it in too much detail because I think we have a webinar coming up with someone from Blue Resources Trust who will talk more about it. But it's not illegal to catch manta rays, oceanic manta rays in Sri Lanka. So there are rules and regulations with regards to exporting of gills, but the actual catching and killing of oceanic mantas is not illegal. So to date, over the last sort of 15 years of research in the Maldives, the Maldivian Manta Ray Project has documented 714 individuals. And our fish market surveys, along with Blue Resources Trust in Sri Lanka, estimate that the number of mantas killed every single year in Sri Lanka is a few hundred up to 1,000 individuals. So it's pretty simple to do the maths. If we've only managed to collect photo IDs of 715 in a few years of research, and yet they're killing nearly 1,000 every single year, it doesn't bode well for the population. So what we have is in the Maldives, in the south of the Maldives, we've got an alive population of oceanic mantas passing through Formula on a seasonal basis. And over in Sri Lanka, we have a very large Mobula fishery, one of the largest in the world, catching a large number of oceanic mantas every single year. And the question for myself and the Manta Trust team is basically to try and figure out, are these two populations connected? And if so, how much? Are the mantas we're seeing dead on the floor of the fish markets in Sri Lanka, are those the same individuals that we could have been swimming with or diving with last year in Formula Atoll? That's kind of what we want to answer. Why is that an important question to answer? Well, if we look at a more sort of global picture of oceanic manta rays on a global scale, the little mantas on the map indicate manta ray hotspots, and the red circles indicate large scale fisheries. If we picture two different sort of scenarios here, first of all, what we call mixed meta population. So all the different populations of oceanic mantas around the world are all mating and reproducing and mixing and moving between one area to another. And yes, it's a one giant global population that's all well connected. Well, if we then look at the effect of fisheries, so those fisheries are going on around the world in Sri Lanka, India, Peru, Indonesia, that sort of places. The effect on the global population will be a negative effect because the entire population will be affected because it is one giant mixed population. However, the population in the Maldives will be like a regional population, for example, the Maldives, will be slightly better off because although the fishermen will be catching and killing those mantas around the Maldives, that population can then mix and get new recruits and reproduce with other populations, and there'll be other mantas coming in from other areas. So it can kind of boost that population and replenish the numbers from other areas. And the effect on, and therefore the effect on sort of regional tourism will be slightly better off. I've used thumbs up here in this case. Not going to be a good scenario because the fisheries are still going on, but they will be better off. If we then look at the sort of flip side of that, another sort of possible scenario is that these populations of manta rays are isolated subpopulations. So the mantas in the Maldives, they're one isolated population, they're only mating within themselves, and it's kind of a closed off unit. Same over in Mozambique, same over in the Andaman near Thailand. These are unique populations separated from one another. Well, that same fishing effort, on a global scale, it will have, again, I've used a thumbs up, but it will be better off because some populations around the world will be completely unaffected by fisheries. So the global population will be somewhat better off. But on a regional scale, somewhere like the Maldives that has a population of oceanic mantas will be much more affected because it won't be able to reproduce and sort of have that input from other populations. And as a result, tourism industries will be greatly affected. So the question for us is basically, what is this level of connectivity between these populations around the world? We're not entirely sure at the moment. There's a number of studies going on with tagging and with genetic studies and stuff like that to try and figure it out. So how can we figure these sorts of things out? Well, first of all, photo identification. Okay, it's quite a simple, cheap, easy methodology to use, but it's very time consuming. And with regards to fisheries, most of the oceanic manta rays, because they're so big, they're cut up into pieces before they're brought back to the market. So it's very hard to kind of piece them together and get an ID image. And it's just not practical. We're not going to get enough data in a short enough time to actually make a difference. Another option is satellite tagging. So we can use satellite telemetry to track and follow where these manta rays are going, find out how far they move in terms of habitat range and whether those overlap with other populations. And we can also look at genetic and stable isotope analysis to look into kind of longer scale migrations and movements. These are all tried and tested methods that have been used around the world in many different manta ray populations and also with other species, other marine species, turtles and sharks and all sorts of different animals. Here's an example from a paper by Josh Stewart and his team. So they found that oceanic mantas around Raja Ampat and over in Mexico, Pacific coast of Mexico, were relatively regional. They weren't straying that far away from their sort of the tagging location where they were seen. These tags were over a sort of 6-month period though, so we do need to keep that in mind. So if we come back to the Maldives and the situation here, it's worth noting that within the Maldivian waters, manta rays are fully protected by law. It is illegal to catch and kill mantas. So oceanic mantas within the EEZ of the Maldives, we can assume are protected. They're safe, which is great news. As soon as we go outside of that EEZ boundary line though, we're into international waters and high seas, and there is no real protection for mantas. So if we assume that this little red line is the habitat range and where a manta spends its life swimming around from Formula, down there in the south of the Maldives, then that's good news because that habitat range is fully enclosed with the EEZ of the Maldives. So that manta ray is living within protected waters and it is going to be well off. And we scale that up to the population will be relatively safe. However, if we find out that the manta rays are straying further and have a larger sort of habitat range and are leaving that EEZ buffer zone, they're now straying into high seas waters where they're vulnerable to fisheries. If we go back to that paper by Josh Stewart, they figured that 95% of the time mantas were staying within a roughly 150 kilometer radius. So if we plot that around formula, again, that whole entire habitat range lies within the EZ, which is perfect. However, that's assuming that the location is centered around formula. If formula is on the edge of that sort of habitat range and the mantas are swimming off elsewhere, suddenly that habitat range extends past EZ and they are vulnerable. Another tagging project over in Mexico, though, has found that manta rays can travel up to 1,400 kilometers. So that now plots the potential habitat range of these individuals way, way bigger than the EEZ of the Maldives, and potentially causes issues with fisheries. So some of the things that we still want to answer with this population are, where are these oceanic manta rays coming from and where are they going to? Are they staying within the sort of relative safety of Maldivian waters, or are they spending much of their time outside of Maldivian waters on the high seas? And are the population of manta rays that we're seeing in the Maldives, are they connected with the population over in Sri Lanka? Just to quickly wrap up, so what we have in the Maldives is a relatively new and pretty sizable population, 700 individuals already after a few 2 or 3 years of kind of intense studies. They appear to be highly transient. They're not hanging around in the same way that reef mantas are in the Maldives. And there is a growing tourism based around sort of diving. A lot of people want to dive and see these oceanic mantas. They're highly vulnerable to nearby fisheries. One of the largest fisheries in the world is very nearby in Sri Lanka. But we need more information on their habitat ranges, where they're swimming, where they're going, before we can really implement effective management strategies. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up everything that we know about the oceanic manta ray population in the Maldives. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we don't know, but we're quite early on in the study, so hopefully we're going to find out some more information in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. That was really interesting. And we've had some good questions already. So we have one from Francesca. She says, thanks for this amazing talk. And she would like to know how do you distinguish between a male and a female manta ray?
Good question. That's exactly the same for all elasmobranch species. So it's the presence or absence of claspers. Claspers are the male reproductive organ for sharks and rays. So male manta will have 2 claspers between the pelvic fins, whereas a female manta will not have claspers. It will just be the 2 pelvic fins and cloaca.
Okay, thank you. Michelle is asking what the closest known oceanic manta cleaning station is to the Maldives.
Ooh, that's a good one. I would probably assume it's over in the Andaman Sea, Similan Islands off the coast of Thailand. They get mantas around Koh Bon, Koh Tat Chai. I think that would probably be the closest. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you think there's likely to be any oceanic cleaning stations in the Maldives?
I'd be surprised if there's any within sort of 30-meter depth range. People have been diving across the Maldives for a good number of years, and it's quite a heavily dived country. I'd be surprised if there was a manta cleaning oceanic manta cleaning station that somebody hadn't found already.
Yeah, okay, cool. Ines is asking about tourism. So she says she knows tourism is a big part of educational and conservation projects, but it could impact the animals and disturb their peace. So do you notice the increase of tourism is affecting oceanic and reef manta ray behavior in the Maldives?
Yes, I mean, tourism is definitely increasing and it is definitely a worry, especially with somewhere like Formula. It's such a small area, it's one island. There's only really 2 or 3 dive sites that most people dive. You can dive around the rest of the island, but the vast majority of people just go to only 2 or 3 dive sites. So you get a lot of dive centers and liverboards and stuff all trying to dive on the same site at the same sort of time of day. And that can definitely lead to over diving, too many people, how much crowding on these dive sites. In terms of seeing an impact on the mantas, I don't think we've been studying the oceanic mantas long enough to sort of see that. We don't have much baseline data from when tourism was much lower. But it's definitely something we're collecting data on. In other areas of the Maldives with the reef manta rays, yes and no, we do see some impacts from tourism. But again, like it varies from atoll to atoll, because some atolls are very heavily dived and the mantas are very used to tourists. Whereas if you go up to kind of the far north of the Maldives and you find reef mantas up there, they're not used to divers and they're much more skittish. It's much, they're much more afraid of tourists.
Okay, thank you. Amber has asked why there are higher or lower proportions of melanistic mantas in different areas.
That's a really good question. I think it's just a genetic trait that varies from population to population. We have 2 or 3 projects ongoing at the moment that are kind of looking at this on a more global scale. So comparing one population of manta rays to another and the kind of incidences of melanism in different populations around the world. But yeah, really interesting studies. I don't know too much about all the different populations, but yeah, I mean, in the Maldives, we've got the largest population of reef mantas in the world, and yet we don't have a single melanistic black morph reef manta in that population. So yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting.
Very mysterious. This is kind of linked. So Valerie would like to know, she says she's curious if there are any transboundary conservation projects going on, given that these mantas might have such a big range, to kind of look at the mantas range, I guess.
Yeah, I know. Well, obviously the Manta Trust is basically formed of the Maldivian Manta Ray Project, and then 20 plus affiliate projects all around the world, all kind of working in collaboration towards common goals. Over in Central America, there are lots of closer populations of oceanic mantas. So there's a lot of collaboration between places like Costa Rica and Peru and Mexico and those sort of Central South American countries. There's a lot of collaboration going on there, which, yeah, you're quite right, is really important, because these manta rays don't know human boundaries of one country to another. That means nothing to them. So we definitely need to be working as more of a sort of global community on a larger scale for protecting these species.
Okay, nice. Best Spot is Oars Dive Centre, who's been on a few of our chats, so thanks to you guys. They're wondering if there are any reports of oceanics from the Atlantic that match outside the Atlantic. So if you've ever matched up the same manta in different places, I guess.
From the Atlantic to somewhere else, to another ocean basin, I don't think so. I'd be very surprised. With oceanic mantas, the kind of thinking was that these are large ocean-going animals that swim from one side of the ocean to the other and like travel across the world. That theory is starting to change. I showed a couple of maps from Josh's paper and a number of other papers looking at very similar stuff, and it's kind of starting to show that the habitat ranges of oceanic mantas is much smaller than we originally thought. They don't travel such long distances, it seems. They are a lot more kind of isolated from one another. But there are still reports of mantas swimming a long way, so it is possible. Yeah.
Another mystery to uncover. Ellie would like to know what started your love of mantas.
That's a good question. I started diving quite young. I had a slightly odd kind of upbringing. I was born and raised overseas. I learned to scuba dive when I was living in Thailand with my parents. And that's where I saw my first manta rays. At university, I wanted to study. I went to university in England, and it was really cold and not very nice. So I wanted to get back out into the tropics and study big sharks and rays and stuff like that. So I was working with whale sharks. I was studying them over in Mexico with Denny Ramirez and in Philippines with Lamave. And then it was kind of a pretty simple switch. I had the opportunity to come out to the Maldives as a volunteer. I did that for 3 months and really enjoyed it, made the most of my time. And yeah, here I am still working with mantas.
Okay, great. Harrison would like to know, if somebody wants to see the Maldivian mantas up close, what's the safest way to do this for the mantas?
It's a good question. It goes the same for both oceanic mantas and reef mantas. We've put together a code of conduct of how to swim with manta rays, which is available on our website. But some of the sort of simple stuff is you want to try and pick a tour operator who's responsible. That's hard to kind of know beforehand, obviously, but read reviews online about the operator and try and sort of gauge that. But basically, you don't want to be driving too close with the boat. You want to be getting in the water some distance, at least 10 meters away from the manta, to avoid kind of getting the boat or the vessel too close. Get into the water nice and slow. Keep your fins underwater. Try not to scream and shout and make too much splashing. And then just basically enjoy the show. Be really relaxed and calm in the water. Obviously, don't swim after the manta ray. They're much, much faster than humans. You're never going to be able to catch up with them. So just staying really nice and relaxed. Quite often they'll sort of circle around a little bit interested, and you'll have a much better experience. So will everyone else, and so will the manta.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Very
no
cool.
touching.
No touching, no riding. Okay, Silvana is asking, why do the mantas have unique spots? Do we have any idea?
I don't think so. I think it's just expression of sort of melanism in the skin pigmentation. I don't think there's any reason why they're sort of unique. It's just similar to sort of human skin tones and freckles and stuff like that. It's just different locations of where these spots are turning up on the belly, and they just happen to be unique enough that we can separate them and individually identify them. A lot of species, like even giraffes and stuff like that, the shapes of the patterns on the giraffe, it's unique for each one. Just happens to kind of form different shapes, and it's enough to individually identify them.
Very lucky for us.
Yeah.
This just randomly happened. Okay, Miriam would like to know, she says, thanks for such an interesting talk. And she wants to know if you've ever worked with suction cameras to see what the manta's doing for the whole day.
Yes, me personally, no, but the Manta Trust we've partnered up with National Geographic's CritterCam. They put suction cup cameras on oceanic mantas over in Mexico, Recitation archipelago, and we have done it with reef mantas in the Maldives as well, but I wasn't part of either of those studies.
Okay, they had a funny thing, didn't they, where they couldn't find a substance to stick the suction cup, and in the end they had to use peanut butter. Is that right?
It was to do with because the skin of manta rays is really rough. It's the dermal denticle, so it's hard to get a good sort of grip with the suction cup. It just kept popping off. So they needed to use some sort of sealant lubricant kind of thing that would be strong enough to hold, but not strong enough to sort of hold the camera on and it never come off kind of thing. And yeah, they found that creamy peanut butter worked a dream.
So funny. Okay, Edward's asking a bit more about Sri Lanka. So he would like to know if there's any data on the frequency of oceanic mantas being landed by the Sri Lankan fisheries, and if this could be used to infer the population range.
Yes, so Blue Resources Trust, who we work closely with over in Sri Lanka, they collect that sort of data. They go around fish markets as frequently as possible. It's rare that you can sort of go every single day to these fish markets and collect data, but what you do is you do it for a couple of weeks or a couple of month period, and then you just extrapolate that and sort of scale that up to a whole year estimate. And yeah, that's basically what we did to get the estimate of around a few hundred, 700, 800, up to a sort of 1,000 individuals every single year. It wasn't that we counted 1,000 individuals, it was a certain block of time. There were that many, multiply that up to a full year. It looks like it will be about 1,000, a bit less.
Okay, thank you. And Daniel from Blue Resources Trust will be giving a talk on the 10th of June. So keep an eye out on our website and our social media pages for that. He's going to be talking about the situation in Sri Lanka. So that's going to be an interesting one. Okay, next question. We have one from Ariana. She's asking if the reef and oceanic manta rays interact or remain separated.
No, they don't really interact, at least not in the Maldives. I've seen the two species together twice in the Maldives. Once on a cleaning station in Ra Atoll, there were a couple of mantas sort of swimming around cleaning, and then an oceanic manta just sort of cruised by, did 1 or 2 laps higher up, definitely not cleaning, sort of checking us out, and then just carried on its merry way. And then in Hanifaru Bay, we had, I think it was 150 reef mantas or something. There were 2 whale sharks as well. Absolutely everything going on that day. And then an oceanic manta decided to swim through as well. And it was really cool to watch the reef manta rays all really, really close together. Very poor social distancing by them. But then the oceanic manta was kind of off to the side, a little bit deeper. And it clearly knew that it wasn't the same species. It wasn't part of their group. It did a couple of barrel roll feeding, like looped around a little bit, but it was considerable distance away from the feeding mantas. So that was really, really cool to see. Got a good little bit of video of that as well.
Yeah, that's some of my favorite footage. I was there that day, but I missed the Oceanic, unfortunately. Okay, Dennis would like to know how people can get involved to help Manta Trust.
It's a great question. There's lots of different things people can do. It really depends on what you are able to do. We run volunteer programs, and some of our affiliate projects take volunteers as well. So if you have a large chunk of time, like 3 months or so, and you're willing to travel and you've got relevant experience diving and sort of in the marine industry, there's options for volunteering and getting involved sort of hands-on. But there's also loads of things people can do at home as well. A lot of what this comes down to is education and awareness. So you yourself, reading around the subject, learning more, knowing more about what's going on, spreading that awareness as well, sharing it with other people. I think you'll find a lot of people know about shark fins these days and sort of that industry. But far less people know about Mobula gill plate industry and the issues that that's having. So I think that's one area that you could sort of help out with. If you've seen mantas anywhere in the world, or you're going diving somewhere, submit photo IDs to us as well of individuals of oceanics or reef mantas from anywhere in the world. We'll pass them on to the relevant project. But also any other Mobula species, if you get photos of, it's really interesting for us. So yeah, there's lots of resources on our website of sort of how you can get involved and how you can help out in different ways.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And we do also have Bex Carter, our Director of Operations, giving a talk on the 5th of June, specifically on how you can help support Manta Trust and how you can get involved with working or volunteering with Manta Trust as well. So we always have quite a lot of questions on this, so I think that would be a good one for people to tune into. Okay, I think we'll have our last question now. This is from Louis, and Louis is asking specifically about the Gulf of California, so it's quite a specific one, but he's wondering if we have any research projects there, as he knows that mantas were decimated there years ago, but he says they returned in 2018, so just wonders if you have any more knowledge on that.
Yeah, not me personally. I spent a bit of time whilst I was working with the whale sharks. I was in La Paz, and I didn't even know about the manta rays there at that time. I think that was during that period where, like you mentioned, they kind of just vanished and they were gone. But a couple of years ago, they did show up again. No, basically, I don't know too much about that population over there. There is a photo ID database. I think Eric Higuera takes a number of photos around that site, and we have other affiliate projects along the Baja Peninsula and then the mainland of Mexico over there. And what's really interesting there is to try and match those individuals up with oceanic mantas that have been seen out in Socorro. I think they've got a couple of photo ID matches, but I think most of the indication that there's connectivity between that is through tagging, either satellite or acoustic tagging, I can't remember, but there's from tagging projects, there's indications that some of the population is at least moving between mainland Mexico and the archipelago out in the middle of the ocean.
Okay, very cool. I think we'll wrap it up there. So thanks very much for joining us, Simon.
Perfect. No
You enjoyed
worries. Thank you.
yourself?
I hope people enjoyed it and learned something new. Obviously, the project's in its early days. There's a lot of unanswered questions and a lot more information out there to learn. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. So thanks to everyone for your great questions. We always have so many good ones, so thank you very much. If you want to learn more about mantas, you can visit our social media pages and our website where we have loads of information. I'll just share my screen here with some information on. There's our social media pages. Tomorrow we have a webinar with Roger Munns. He's one of the Blue Planet 2 principal filmographers or videographers. So he's going to tell us about filming for Blue Planet 2, which is going to be super interesting. That one is at 10 o'clock BST, so a bit earlier than usual. And Friday we have a talk from Karen. She founded the Manta Mexico project. So she's going to tell us about Mexican manta rays at 3 p.m. on Friday BST. If you want to help support manta conservation and support the Manta Trust, you can do lots of things. One of them is by joining the Cyclone. This is a members only hub where we share all of our latest research and some of our research expeditions and initiatives. So lots of cool videos on there, and you can sign up to that, and any funds raised will go towards manta research and conservation. For anyone who's wondering about getting a certificate for the talks, you can visit our website or email us on info@mantatrust.org to get your certificate. And thanks to everyone that tuned in, and hopefully see some of you tomorrow. Okay, goodbye.